All right, this time I would like to welcome in my very special guest, Lauren Schloss. Schloss. I knew I was going to mess it up. There it was. I thought about it too much
Oh,
and
yes,
I
you
messed it
did.
up. Sorry. Do you want to say it?
Schloss.
There
Yeah.
you go. All right. Okay. Thank you. Lauren is a colleague of mine. We've known each other for 4 years now, 4 years.
Yeah.
And she is an amazing therapist who has lots of experience both in the substance use world. Since I think 2010, you said you've been practicing as a substance abuse LADC counselor, right?
Yes.
And now a supervisor in that field. And then more recent as a LPC, right? Licensed professional counselor,
Yes.
intern slash, but
Yes.
she's not an intern. She's very knows what she's doing and very educated in her profession and has taught me a lot over the years, even though I've been her LPC supervisor, but that's just a label, not necessarily always what's what, right? So we all learn from each other for sure. But anyway, so I've known Lauren for about 4 years now and really appreciate, like I said, getting to know her and her insight and her just level of expertise in the field. But today we're going to kind of incorporate both sides of this, like our professionalism as well as just our life story. Lauren's been through a lot in the last few years and was gracious enough to come in and share that with us and talk about her story. But first, before we get into that, anything I forgot as far as like an introduction or about yourself that you want to share with people?
I don't think so. I think you covered it all, but thank
We're
you so much for
married,
that
right?
intro.
Right.
I feel very honored with what you said and thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Well, you are married and have a child, and then that's
Yes.
how old?
My son is 3 and I'm currently expecting another child who's also a boy. So,
Oh, congrats. Nice. All
yeah,
right.
thank you.
All right. Okay. And husband of how many years? How long have you been married?
Let's see. We've been married for 4 years, together for it's going to be 10 it's going to be 5 years this year married, and then together for 10 years.
Oh, nice. All right.
Mhm.
Congrats on that too. So,
Thank
all
you.
right. Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Okay. And I don't remember, like, just from our history and stuff and knowing each
Mhm.
other, are you from Vegas originally, or where are you originally from?
Yes, so when I was 5, my parents and I moved to Las Vegas. I grew
Oh,
up
okay.
as an only child,
Hmm.
and my dad was in the military and got stationed at Nellis
Oh, okay.
Air Force Base.
Nellis Air Force Base in North Las Vegas for anybody that's wondering about that.
Yes.
And that is a key to what you said there too, as far as like when we talk about your story, that Lauren's an only child, because that's a factor in sort of some of the things that have gone on for her over the last, few years and stuff. So,
Mhm.
so one of the things that part of the reason I wanted to bring Lauren on too is I recently had a podcast where we talked about post-traumatic thriving and just the idea of like how we move through difficult things, whether we consider it full trauma or not. I know that's been a big buzzword lately as far as, experiencing trauma, but I think trauma is little t, big T, all sorts of stuff. But, I mean, I don't think we want to minimize the things that we go through and not maybe acknowledge that there's some level of trauma in them. But I wanted to bring her on to kind of talk about her story, as well as just kind of giving us some sense of hope of moving through some difficult things, which is kind of what the book had talked about in my interview that I did a few weeks ago on the podcast, and kind of getting back to more of a basis of what I did, early on in the podcast. I used to kind of bring just regular people on like yourself and myself, just to talk
Mhm.
about our stories, so people can connect to that. It feels like and see that, hey, people go through things and we can come out the other side better for them. So that's a big part of what I wanted to bring Lauren on for. So with that said, do you want to kind of just, I guess, give us a sense of some of your history over the last few years and what you've been experiencing in life? With,
Sure. Yeah.
I know it's a kind of a little bit vague, but I think you know where we're going with it. So yeah.
Yes. Yes. So um, there was a lot of death, a lot of heartache. It all somewhat started to happen in the beginning of 2020. I had my son, and then COVID started. And so that was just awful, strange time for everybody that was having to go through it. And it felt very isolating, especially with a newborn, being so scared of, I don't know if I can leave my house with my child and if something bad is going to happen to him. And so it was extremely isolating. And then in the middle of 2020, we found out that my mother was sick, and I was taking her to so many doctor appointments all the time, and nobody could figure out what was happening with my mom. And it turned into this long battle. It wasn't until, let's see, probably a good almost a year until she got her diagnosis of pancreatic cancer. And that was sometime in 2021. And then it began this extremely difficult battle of fighting the medical system and having her go through a surgery that she really never came out of the same.
Mm-hmm.
And during this time, I was so focused on my mom and taking care of her, I didn't really suspect anything. I wasn't prepared for any other potential family
Challenges or whatever.
challenges. Yeah, that's a perfect word to use. And then on January 1st of 2022, my dad passed away. And he was battling his own illnesses, but I really didn't think, I don't think anybody really thought to look at him, to focus on him. And I think that he was so focused on helping my mom that it was a lot of stress for him, and he wasn't able to take care of himself the way he needed to.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as we mentioned at the start of this podcast, I'm an only child, and everything kind of fell on me.
Yeah.
And to not only take care of my small child, but my household, and then to be the primary caretaker for my mom.
Right.
And she happened to pass away in September of 2022. So it was 9 months after my dad had passed, then
right.
I ended up losing my mom.
Okay. So let me kind of go back a little bit. So, you lose your dad, like kind of in this process, like, again, taking care of mom, going through that, and then suddenly lose dad. What was that impact like for you? Just kind of in the sense of just, okay, almost like you're preparing yourself for mom to, maybe to pass. And then now this happens. I mean, we know, as far as like grief and loss, but also even trauma, it's like the unexpected and kind of how that maybe impacts us. What was that like for you, kind of going through that experience and, with your dad?
Oh, that was so challenging, because it was challenging, but then almost in a way, it became a learning experience of what I didn't want to happen with my mom. So it was actually, in a strange way, a beneficial experience, so that I could prevent the same things happening to her. But for my dad, it was completely unexpected. I really wasn't expecting it. And when the process started to happen, when he was passing away, which happened very, very quickly, it just took me by complete surprise. I didn't feel at the end of it that there was anything left unsaid. I thought to myself, my dad knows that I love him, that I'm trying my best. And I didn't feel that there was any unfinished business.
Yeah.
But the actual passing away of my dad, it was this long drawn out period when it didn't have to be. I remember talking to my dad before he ended up being hospitalized around Thanksgiving. And so already his health wasn't the best, but I didn't think that he was going to pass away from this hospitalization or what was going on. Right. And then, so I remember speaking to him then, and he said, when my time comes, I want to go naturally. I don't want I don't want to be put on any life-saving measures. When it's my time to go, I'm ready to go. And so I was like,
Mhm.
okay, that I can, I will honor that for you. But then when he passed away so quickly, we didn't have a chance to set up a living will and testament. I wasn't able to act as a power of attorney for him and act out his wishes for him. And so that became a challenge when he started passing away. I call 911, and the paramedics and the doctors are going to do everything to prolong life.
Right.
And so I didn't get a chance to say
No, he doesn't
truly what
want that.
his,
Yeah.
yeah, truly what his last wishes were.
Mhm.
And so it became this long, drawn out process of putting him on life-saving machines. And they did all of these tests and they said, his brain is dying. He's really not going to survive this. And at that point I said, yes, please take him off of all life-saving measures. Let's let it happen naturally. But that experience haunted me for a very long time. I ended up having nightmares daily,
Mm.
and it was nightmares of just watching it happen and watching it unfold and feeling at a complete loss of control, really,
Yeah.
and feeling like I failed in some way of letting somebody suffer when they didn't want that.
Mhm. Yeah. So kind of, I mean, even just as you're saying that, kind of like some of the things that that get talked about in this book, post-traumatic thriving, it's, he talks about kind of being in the surviving stage of like, whether it's like we're confronting something about our trauma or kind of like moving into an acceptance state. But even before we get to that, there can be, some things like where it's like we're maybe experiencing some depression or anger. um like where is that, like where were you at in that space, do you think?
With
Just,
it just happening.
yeah, like where you did it kind of
Oh,
like I mean,
I
because like
would
the
now.
things that you talk about, it's
Mhm.
like you said, there's some regret and different things, and then there's also just I mean, frustration and stuff. And yeah, I guess, yeah, where were you at?
Mhm. I think, in knowing the stages of grief, I think I was bouncing between bargaining and depression.
Hmm.
So the sense of depression of, I just lost my dad, but I felt that I didn't have time to grieve because I had to pick up my pieces and I had to help my mom now. And
Right.
that was my responsibility. And then it became this, as you said, just existing or thriving, I think was the word you
Surviving,
used.
the surviving
Surviving.
stage. Yeah, just yeah, yeah.
It was just going through the motions. I didn't,
Hmm.
looking back, it's absolutely depression where I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel happiness, but I also didn't feel any sadness. It was just this very numb existence of just going through the motions. And it was an extremely challenging time also for my son and my husband,
Hmm.
because I would come home and they want to spend time with me. They want to have
Yeah,
a good
be with
time.
mom
And
or be with my wife, or yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
and I'm just so emotionally drained that all I wanted to do is sleep and not
Yeah.
continue to not feel anything.
Right. So as I mean, this is kind of an interesting thought, and I think you talked about this when I heard, which one thing we didn't mention, Lauren has her own podcast, right? Called
Oh
Nora's
yeah.
Table, right? So there's,
Yes.
so when I listened to one episode talking about your mom and stuff, and I think I don't know if the person asked you this question or you just said, it's like, as a therapist, it's like, what advice were you giving yourself in that moment? And I think sometimes we have to realize too, even though we have the skills, we're still human and we still experience things in a very real way. And we have to kind of maybe go through them a little bit before we can kind of recognize our own stuff and kind of where we're
Hmm.
at. So I don't know if, like you said, you're in this situation where you're going through this, you're kind of surviving, relationships are being affected, obviously, personally. So how are you, like, what advice are you giving yourself in those moments? It'll all
That's,
be okay. Or
yeah, no, you know what? I don't really think that I was thinking in a therapist
mindset, or
mentality.
yeah.
No, not at
Hmm.
all. And I was going to therapy and I continue to go to therapy now. I was going to therapy consistently with my therapist.
Hmm.
And I think that that was definitely a life-saving grace for myself because it's just so challenging. But there were two big moments where she pointed out to me two different things. And I was like, holy smokes, I didn't even see that in myself.
Mhm.
So one moment I remember talking to her, and this was after my mom had passed. And I was like, I just don't know why I'm so angry. I can't control my frustration. I'm throwing things, I'm slamming doors, and it'll be just something very small that sets me off. And usually I'm a pretty even keel person. I can get frustrated, but I can let it go. And she was like, Lauren, you're in the anger stage of grief. And it was a light bulb moment where, oh my
Mhm.
goodness, I didn't even see that in myself. And I know the stages of grief and I help my clients go through
Through
these
it,
things.
yeah, yeah.
But then when you're experiencing it, I think that's why going to therapy is so important because you need that objective point of view of somebody else looking on the outside in and saying, did you think about this? Have
Right.
you noticed this? And it's,
Yeah.
whoa, I didn't see that in myself.
Yeah, which maybe again, as a therapist, you had the awareness to kind of recognize that and be able to kind of put that into action.
Mhm.
Curious, what was the second thing? You said there was two.
This,
Yeah.
yes. So the second one is very, very recent. So I'm currently pregnant. I'm 15 weeks pregnant. And at the beginning of my pregnancy, as soon as I found out I was pregnant, I kept having this continuing thought of, I'm certain this baby is going to die. I am absolutely 100% certain this child is going to die. And there was nothing that anybody could say that would make me feel better. And I remember talking to my therapist about it, and she said, that's trauma. That is a trauma response from all the death that you have experienced. It's hypervigilance of waiting for the next bad thing to happen, of waiting for that ball to drop. And so, talking to her, and it's really bad for pregnancy to be so anxious and so worried.
Hmm.
And so just working a lot on mindfulness and CPT and just accepting and letting it go and just living in the present moment has really been helpful. And then for listeners, my pregnancy is absolutely fine. I've had tests done. Everything is exactly how it's supposed to be going. And so I think with time, I've learned to ease into it and I don't have that continuing fear. But her saying that and almost validating my experience and what I've been through was almost in a way comforting of, okay, now I understand why I have this immense, intense fear. And I
Right.
don't have to feel that. I can let it go.
Yeah. Or and just even to kind of recognize the origin versus like almost seeing it as
Hmm.
truth, right? Like, no, this is really
Yes.
what's going to happen. This is
Yes.
how it's going to be. And it's like, no, that's the trauma kind of coming out, which is,
Hmm.
in the stages that are in this book, post-traumatic thriving, when we're in the surviving stage, which, you know, one of the things he talks about is just sort of this idea of sorting it out, right? And I think that that's kind of what obviously therapy can help us do, is just go through the process of sorting it out, like you're doing, right? Where it's like,
Hmm.
where does this fit? This belief that I now have, where does that fit? Well, that fits in this kind of notion of trauma, which is that's where it that's where it originates from, right? And it's coming from that place. So now I can kind of, not compartmentalize that in a negative way, but put it in that space of like, okay, that's my trauma talking. Now, what am I going to do to, work through that or change that or not pay attention to that or whatever it is, right?
Hmm.
So that's another added bonus, right? I'm kind
Yeah.
of sorting it out and moving towards, a better way of being, which it sounds like is happening, right? Like, because you said there's a positive thing happening. I want to enjoy it. I don't want
Yes.
to fear it the whole time, right?
Hmm.
So that's good. Um, Something else I just want to say too, just as far as like the emotions, even like when you talk about like the anger and stuff, I think, and whether it's, as a therapist or just as a normal person, I think sometimes just allowing ourselves to have those emotions is so important. I remember like, when my mom was passing away, she had cancer as well, and we were able to be with her at the time that she passed. But in just those final moments, if you've ever been with somebody that's, actively, I guess they call it actively dying, it's not a very pleasant place to be,
Hmm.
and their breathing is really terrible and it sounds terrible. anyway, we were in the hospital and my brothers were there, and my mom's husband was there, and there was fans on that were kind of like drowning out the noise, like that bad breathing. And then for some reason, somebody went and turned off the fans, and then all you could really hear in that moment was the breathing. And obviously emotions are heavy, and you're in that space, and you're, saying goodbye to your mom. And I about lost my mind. I was like, who turned off the fans?
Yeah. Get
Okay,
back in here.
right. We'll get those back on. But so I mean, I think the idea of the emotion and stuff is just, we have to allow ourselves that space to be able to experience that, whether it's anger, depression, whatever it is. I mean, it's going to be there, but being able to, kind of move through it. So anyway, I kind of derailed from what you were saying, but so you gave us the two things. So the angry part, and then just the recognition of kind of experiencing the trauma in the form of this belief that you carried. Was there anything else you feel like you received as a result of those experience? I mean, that you've noticed that you've had to kind of work through, or, address as you've kind of gone through this process?
I think it's an ebb and flow of working through. It's you find yourself in the acceptance stage of, okay, I'm okay with it, and I'm moving forward, and I'm in a good place. But then maybe there's some sort of trigger that happens that you're not aware of, a song that comes on, a movie that you're watching, a holiday, a birthday, an anniversary, things like that are very triggering.
Right.
And I didn't realize it until this January 1st of 2023, when that was the death day of my dad. And it hit me really hard. And it was almost like, I can't believe it's already been a year. A whole year has gone by without my dad, and what I wouldn't give to talk to him and say something to him.
Yeah.
And so I think now, moving forward, realizing that, and then what I'd like to do, talking with my therapist, is almost creating rituals on those days and making them happy and pleasant and something enjoyable, but also can take my mind off of just thinking about the negative experience.
Yeah.
But even happy holidays are difficult too, because you just miss them and you want them there.
Yeah. Well, one thing, and I know this isn't a therapy session, so I don't, if this feels too heavy, then it's okay. But I just think about this because sometimes I felt this way, for different reasons. But like after losing my mom, I don't really have a close relationship with my dad. So I, sometimes you kind of feel alone, like this sense of like not having, but I have 4 siblings, which is different. So what has that experience been like for you, if you don't mind talking a little bit about that? Because being an only child, I mean, that's kind of, I imagine it's a weird feeling, right?
Yeah, it is. I want to, I guess, go back a little bit. I do want to say that I do have a older half sister from my dad.
Okay.
She's 10 years older than me, but we never grew up together, and it's a somewhat disconnected relationship. But so we do check in with each other every once in a while, but the physical things of having to go through all of this were by myself, because we also didn't have any family that live here. There's no aunts and uncles or cousins, anybody else living here. And so I try to find support where I can by reaching out to family members, talking about it when I feel like I need to talk about it. And sometimes it's just telling a friend, hey, I'm really missing my mom right now, and just having that validation from somebody to say, yeah, I mean, it sucks. I can't imagine, and that's very helpful too.
Okay. Yeah. Cause I think in the book, Post-Traumatic Thriving, he talks about once we kind of like are in or are moving towards the thriving stage, some of the key parts of that are like faith, connection, forgiveness, resilience, and gratitude. And I've heard, even like, it was interesting because without knowing it, you kind of talked about even going through your dad's death and kind of seeing it as a gift or a blessing, just as far as like being able to learn stuff. So, I mean, there's kind of moving into a little bit of gratitude, not in a in its own kind of way, right? It gave me a perspective that I needed for my mom, or I wanted for my mom, so that I could do things differently for her. But like, that idea of connection too, that's a big part of thriving, right? Reconnecting. So reconnecting even with my son or my husband, or, kind of rebuilding those connections, but also trying to find other connections, support systems in the world. That's a big part of, I think, the healing. It sounds like that's something that you've looked for as well, right?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Uh, I remember a time where my husband made me laugh, and this was after my mom had passed. And I remember sitting with him, and it was just this joyful laughter and big belly laughs, and my face hurt because I was laughing so hard. And then I remember, and there were tears coming out of my eyes because I was laughing so hard. And I remember after I finished laughing, thinking back and saying to myself, I can't remember the last time I've laughed like that. And I can't remember the last time I felt this joy and happiness, and just feeling so thankful to be able to have that emotion almost be welcomed to come back to me.
Mhm.
It felt like
Yeah.
it's just so significant because it felt like it was almost the first step to starting a healing journey.
Yeah. It's awesome. So, and speaking of the healing journey too, I mean, obviously, as we've been talking about going to therapy and this experience, and kind of like, getting back to yourself, which is kind of like the whole idea, like, finding yourself again, or even after going through that time where maybe at times you might have felt selfish, like I'm giving all this time to my dad and my mom, and like neglecting, my husband and child. But at the same time, you kind of have to be a little bit selfish still to heal, right? I mean, what's that
Mhm.
been like for you?
I definitely made a commitment to myself, and this was
Hmm.
after my mom had passed. And I said, okay, this is going to be the year where I give back to myself. And this is going to be the year where I take care of myself physically, mentally, spiritually, in every possible way that I feel like I need it. And thankfully, I have a really great support in my husband, where he says, yes, absolutely, do what you need to do. I'm here for you, whatever it is. And so I'm extremely thankful to have a supportive partner to be able to do those things. But I feel like that has been very key for myself, in the
Hmm.
sense of, I was sitting with my mom in the hospital sometimes for days on end, and I wouldn't be eating because I'd be thinking, the doctor's going to walk in as soon as I get up and go down to the cafeteria to eat. I need to be sitting here so I can talk to the doctor and advocate for her. I wasn't exercising. I just wasn't taking care of myself, as I think other caretakers that might be listening can resonate with, in the sense of, yeah, you definitely neglect yourself a lot to be able to take care of another human being. And then, especially when you add on the factor of somebody that's close to you, a family
Hmm.
member.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think, I mean, one is, I hope people, if they have to, they replay that first part, because again, just what you said, like when that happened, I basically kind of had this internal moment where I said, okay, this is like, I've got to do this for myself. I've got to take this, time for myself. And that, because I think a lot of people would feel guilty about doing that, or they'd feel, again, like I said, selfish about, but it's almost like, if I don't do that, then what? Right? If I don't,
Yeah.
because when he talks about in his book, the post-traumatic thriving, like the dive, the survive, or the thrive stage, is like, if I don't get back to thriving, then what good am I to the people around me? If I'm in that dive stage where I'm depressed, I'm angry all the time,
Hmm.
I'm really not that good. But it's like, but some people, like I said, they might still feel guilty about, taking the time to do the things to heal. But yeah, you kind of need to, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
I think even as a mother, I talk to a lot of my clients are women, are mothers themselves. And a lot of times you'll hear a woman say, oh, I just feel so guilty leaving my child at home or leaving my family. And they're working women. they cook, they do the laundry, they clean, they do all of these things for everybody else. And they just say, man, I just feel so guilty taking this day to go and get a massage or get my nails done or go have lunch with a friend. And why do we allow ourselves to feel this guilty when you might feel so refreshed taking that time to yourself and giving back to yourself, and then you come back and you're an even better
Yeah.
mother or an
Right.
even better parent or partner, because you've taken that time to just take a break and come back and say, okay, you know, I've given back to myself. I don't feel as drained anymore. And you know, so I
Yeah.
encourage
Now,
people to do those things.
right. I
Yeah.
think that that's a key to, like I said, you know, taking care of yourself sets you up in a much better place to be refreshed and to be able to have the energy to do or to give to others. So it's like,
Mhm.
you know, I mean, it's a better process of it, but again, getting past the guilt or whatever it is that maybe kind of keeps us from that is important. So, couple things then really just as far as like kind of turning this and wrapping up, but I guess in general, either as a therapist or as your own experience, any thing that you would share with people outside of just even just, you know, making sure that we take care of ourselves, that going through difficult things, whether it be loss or other kind of, yeah, just in general, any kind of thoughts for people?
So maybe somebody
Yeah.
that is having challenges, potentially going through being a
Yeah. Just,
caregiver or having
yeah.
loss, and what suggestions I would give.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. That was kind of vague. Yes. That, yeah. Just going through that kind of a situation. Like, yeah. What kind of things would you suggest for them?
I can speak for myself, and what
Mhm.
helped for me
Yeah.
is
I trust that'd
is
be good advice.
I would hope so. You know, just finding that support when you're in the midst of it, it's so challenging because it feels that it's never ending. I remember going through it and thinking, I don't know when this is going to end. I don't see
Mhm.
the finish line. I feel like I'm running a marathon and I don't see the end. And I'm just getting so drained and so burnt out. And then also accepting, if the time when the time comes that potentially your loved one passes, accepting there might be some feelings of relief,
Mhm.
and that's okay to
Yeah.
feel this, oh, I don't have to be burdened anymore and I don't have to worry about them anymore, and I feel relieved that I can now focus on myself.
Yeah.
And that's okay, and I think that we need to normalize feeling that way,
Mhm.
and talking about it, reaching out and having that support of people that you can talk to, and they're not going to be shy to talk about death and the really ugly side of all of it. I think that
Right.
that's key, to talk about all of those things.
And I think that that goes back to something that I have tried to share with clients for a long time now, since it kind of came to me, is just that it's a, like we can hold more than one feeling at a time, meaning like
Mm,
I can feel relieved and sad at the same time, right? Like I'm sad that they're gone, but I'm
yes.
relieved that they're not suffering, or that they're gone, or like you said, that that burden's been taken away. Like we can hold more than one feeling, and I think we get too kind of caught up in the black and white of like, oh well, if you feel this sense of relief, well, like, are you not, you know, you're happy that they're gone, or they're what? And it's like
Hmm.
that, those things don't have to mean that, right? It's just like we can feel that sense of relief and still feel sad. You know, those two things can exist at the same time. And I
Hmm.
think we are too quick to judge ourselves as being bad or wrong or whatever if we start to have that feeling of relief, and it's like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling that. No, you should feel that, and you can feel that. You can also feel sad at the same time, you know, because you've lost somebody. You know, they can go down the same path, right? So
Hmm.
that's important to remember with that. But that's, I think that's great to hear as well. So any other tidbits or things that you can think of? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but sorry.
I think it's hard to think of things when you're going through the
Going,
midst of it. I would say
yeah,
go to therapy, find a support group if you can, and then afterwards just take care of yourself, and don't be afraid to ask people when you need help,
yeah,
because people that love and care about you, they want to be there for you, they want to help, and sometimes they don't know what to do.
Mhm.
And so it could be something as basic as, can I just have a hug, or I need to talk about something. And sometimes you can call somebody and say, I need to talk about something, anything but this. So
Right.
get on the phone with me and just distract me.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's just very comforting.
Right.
So yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I like that directive and just kind of being clear and being okay to say this is what I need right now. Again, I think we're afraid to maybe upset people or whatever, but like, sometimes we just need what we need, right? And
Hmm.
that's okay to ask for it and be specific, because then we're not going to feel disappointed or then upset. Because if we have a conversation where somebody makes us talk about something we want to talk about, then it's like, now I feel worse. Why did I make that
Oh,
phone call?
right.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. But people aren't mind readers. Sometimes you have
Right.
to tell them
You have
exactly
to
what
tell
you
them.
need.
Right. Okay. Well, I think that's some great stuff, and
Yeah.
and not
Well,
great stuff as far as,
yeah.
going through that, but great. Yeah. Go ahead.
Hmm.
What were you saying?
Well, I don't know if anybody's asked you this on your podcast, but what tips and advice would you give, since you've also lost your mother around the same time that I lost mine?
Yeah. I mean, I like you, I think as far as like the idea of like support, I mean, that's a great, as far as support and going through it and finding people that you can connect to is important. And I think for me, what was important is like I really, and maybe again this was like the therapy brain, but it's like in that moment I just wanted to be in that moment, you know what I mean, and not think
Mm,
about anything too much ahead or whatever the what ifs. It's just like being in that moment, and like it was what it was, like, my mom was passing away. And I mean, even like rewinding it, it's like I think it's different when you kind of like have a little bit of time to prepare. Because I know me and my wife have talked about this. Her dad died unexpectedly of a heart attack. My mom had her diagnosis, and then I think your mom kind of outlived her diagnosis, right? Like it was kind of
yes.
so did my mom. She was like, I think given like 8 months, and she lived like 2+ years or whatever.
Hmm.
But I think for me, you'd said this earlier, and it was like, I didn't have like any regrets or anything like that. I didn't have anything to be worried about. Did I say this? Did I not say this? Because prior to, I just made the commitment, like I'm gonna talk to my mom every day if I can. I'm gonna be with her, when I can. I'm gonna, just do what I can to make the most of this time. And so when it really got to that point, I didn't feel anything but just like, okay, like sad, because I'm sad and I'm losing you, but I didn't feel that sense of like anger or like unsettledness, like there was unfinished business or anything like that. And so I think when we can prepare, we need to prepare, and we need to do what we can to kind of make that the best possible situation. I get that we don't always get that time, right?
Hmm.
And so if we don't get that time, it's maybe a little bit different for people, because now maybe they do have some of the unfinished business, or they do have some of those other complicated feelings to work through. And for that, I would just encourage therapy, right? Because I mean, you
Yeah.
can't, because you can't, it's not good to sit with those things forever. Like you need to work them out and try to, like what you said, is like get maybe a different perspective, because maybe you're just seeing it one way because that's the only way that you've held on to it for your entire life, right? So to be able to get outside of that and maybe get perspective of what you've experienced with a parent or a loved one that maybe you've lost, I think that's all important too. So yeah, hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
But I mean, and I think the other part too that's important is obviously when it comes to feelings and emotions, everybody's different, and we're going to experience things in a different way. But I think even just again that allowance of like whatever it is that you feel, it's okay to feel, right? And
Hmm.
just letting yourself go through that, because maybe one day it's anger, maybe another day it's sad, maybe it's back to anger, maybe it's whatever, depressed, whatever, sad, they all kind of like those kind of run together. And sometimes hopefully it's happy, right? Like that you can just cherish the time and the moments and the memories and the laughter that you had with that person, and that you can just kind of be caught up in that side of it as well. So whatever it is, I think it's important to just let yourself feel that, right?
Hmm.
So okay, well, I appreciate you coming on, Lauren. And obviously, again, just best to you. I think you are showing what it can take, or it's like for people to kind of go through things, because whether it's loss or just some other difficult challenge, there's a process of going through it. and we have to find that path for each of us. And, you know, the idea of, you know, dealing with it and confronting it and just being able to be with something difficult is hard. And, you know, it's not as easy a thing. So if we have to ask for help or go seek help for that, it can be a positive. So anyway, thanks again for coming on and
Thanks,
sharing your
Ryan.
story, and we will talk soon.
Yes. Thank you so much.